Good afternoon. Thanks, all of you, for making time to join us today on this panel today on generative AI. It really is an area where there's a tremendous amount of opportunity which we see ahead of us in India, and not just India, around the world. We have with us a very esteemed panel today. We have Shauryam from Rupeezy, CEO of Rupeezy. We have Jaya Vaidyanathan, CEO of BCT Digital. We have Pratik Adani, CTO and co-founder of Samco Securities. I am Harish Prasad. I'll moderate the panel today, and of course, as part of the session, if there are inputs, of course, I'll jump in with my inputs as well. But before we start off, I'd like to just just go through a quick round of introductions. I'm Harish Prasad. I'm head of FIS's banking business here in India and the APAC region. We have, as a part of FIS, I manage a business which spans India, spans a geography which starts from India and goes all the way through to Australia, New Zealand at the other end. We have a broad presence in the region, work primarily with banks and financial services organizations. The topic of the discussion today is very close to my heart, the topic of AI and the impact it really is having on the industry today. It's a conversation we are having with a lot of clients as well, and very timely that we are really getting to meet to exchange our views and thoughts. I look forward to a very productive and interesting discussion. I'll hand over to Shauryam for a quick intro. Shauryam.
Hi, Harish. Thank you for having me. So, in the spirit of the topic today, I asked ChatGPT to introduce me. So here it is. Hi, I am Shauryam Gupta. I am an IT Kharagpur alumni, and I'm currently the CEO of Rupeezy. Now, Rupeezy is the only broking platform purpose-built for professional traders and investors. Being a developer and a hacker myself, I am deeply passionate about technology and the impact it can have on inclusivity and accessibility.
Thank you, Shauryam. Jaya, if you'd like to take a minute to introduce yourselves.
Sure. Jaya Vaidyanathan, CEO of BCT Digital Group. What we do is make risk and compliance products. And this spans across multiple industries: banking and financial services, energy and utilities, and sustainability products as well. And we've always believed in AI, and AI is the backbone of most of our product solutions. Little rewind, I did start my career as an investment banker. I went to Cornell. He said IIT, so I just wanted to say that too. And then, among other things, I was a partner with Accenture, worked with, was leading technology for Standard Chartered Bank before I started this. And so completely believe in the power of AI because that's the backbone of a lot of our products. I do, and since the audience, again, some of our panelists are from the mutual fund industry, I do sit on the board of UTI, AMC, and PwC Integrate, among others. I just wanted to kind of tee that off with that.
Thank you, Jaya. Thanks for that introduction. Pratik, if you could take a minute to introduce yourselves as well as Samco.
Sure. So I'm Pratik Adani. I am CTO and co-founder of Samco. Samco was one of the first leading discount brokers in the country. And we have always oriented ourselves as tech first. In 2012, we started off adopting technology into traditional broking. And we have seen a long journey of how technology has grown. AI, recently, we have started adopting it a lot, and it is very close to what we are doing for our future products. So would love to discuss it in detail.
Thank you, Pratik. Thanks for that. And yeah, it's quite a diverse set of people we have today here on the panel. I'm sure we all bring different perspectives, but I think eventually, I think the discussion itself will bring up quite some interesting things. So Let's start with the first area. And again, this is a very interesting piece of findings or interesting findings coming out of the study that FIS did around Gen AI. And it is a global study, of course. We've had very similar surveys being done elsewhere as well, but the surveys in India were done, of course, keeping a bit of an urban audience in mind, but at the same time, it gives a reasonably representative view on really what India and Indian consumers are thinking about Gen AI and how do they really how are they responding to Gen AI, right? So that's really the basis on which we have a few findings we'd like to sort of get into a little more during this conversation. Very interestingly, almost 88% of consumers who were surveyed during the study in India said they were all familiar with Gen AI, which is a very interesting finding. And of course, a very high percentage of these consumers also said they've experienced it in some form, right? And these numbers are way ahead of other markets, US, UK, Australia, Singapore, all of these markets that we surveyed. And that was a very, very interesting finding for us. And again, this brings up a very interesting question. I'd like to pose this to Jaya initially. What, Jaya, would you think are the factors which are driving Indian consumers' familiarity, level of familiarity and adoption of Gen AI and Gen AI-based offerings? Do you see any reasons why why they seem to be ahead of the rest?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Harish. I think we leapfrogged through a lot of technology changes. And the reason was, from landlines, we didn't have landlines for the longest time. And that was part of the privatization era. And then it leapfrogged to mobiles. And most Indians do have a mobile device and that supports it. So I think this leapfrog of technology and IT being some of the fun is part of the core of the services industry and people's familiarity with it may have contributed in part to trying out new things in the technology world far ahead of what happens in other markets because the appetite to try new things in technology world has caught up quite a lot with the general population. Second, you will note that we have our population segment and the youth and the younger generation is much higher than other markets. You would see that the mature, like if you look at the Japan market, you have a lot more older people than younger people as part of the population. So that the youth driving technology and that being the core of our population is a key factor when it comes to who's using it. And third is more in terms of what are they using for. That will drive that change because ChatGPT, the buzz around it was extensive. And and a lot of what is happening in that area, and you also have Indian Americans being CEOs of companies, and that's also it hits the limelight quite a lot in the India scene and watching what's coming out. So Google, Microsoft, all of these are household names in India at the moment. And anything that spurts or something that new comes in, and how do you order things that's got the fascination of an average Indian in today's context. So I would say it's the youth primarily, the fascination with technology, a fascination with specific large technology companies. All of that have contributed to it. And the use cases are quite brilliant because they use it in their day-to-day lives. When it comes to even we were jokingly saying from drafting a leave letter to kind of writing essays to what do you use it for. Those are all factors. And I think there is a big push also from other languages because people are not as familiar with English in the business usage. And when you ask ChatGPT, it can draft the most basic of things. So I also find that non-native speakers, I don't know if you said that as part of the survey, but non-native speakers of English have also adapted to this in a big way. So I would say those are some of the fundamental drivers.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you hit upon some very important points there. Demographics for sure. India has probably the advantage of demographics. Probably a few other markets are like India as well. and we need to see what will emerge out of similar studies in those markets as well. Pratik, I'd like to also get your views on this. And again, you are really one of the younger people here on the panel today, and probably are a lot more closer to the kind of demographic that we've been talking about. So what's your view around this? Is what Jaya really talking about? Is that pretty much what you think it is, or is there anything else you think there is to this high level of familiarity and probably even adoption in a way?
So first of all, though I thank you for calling me young. I'm a 38-year-old guy, not the Gen Zs and the young millennials. But yeah, so I would like to continue from what Jaya was speaking. So first and foremost, though it looks and sounds very surprising that India is leading the new Gen AI adoption, but to be honest, recently in India as a country has been very tech forward, I would say. So if you look at big use cases or big technology use cases like UPI, Aadhaar, CoWIN, all these people have realized that adopting technology in your day-to-day life is of great usage, and it makes your life really easy. And so in India, we are ready to experiment with something which can help us a lot. So I think as a country, it is very good for us because we are adopting newer technologies faster. And of course, the demographics, like Jaya spoke, is helping that carry forward. Also, secondly, what I feel is in Western countries, the trust is more on a paid service. So because there is a lot of money, people have a mentality that they pay for a paid service and it is better rather than something which is easy to access or freely available. Whereas in India, it is probably the other way around. Probably somebody like the Geo has changed that mindset that something which is available in mass and is useful can be adopted really well. And if it yields benefit, the adoption becomes crazy. And that is precisely what we are seeing with generative AI, especially with ChatGPT. Because it is free, it is easily available. I think people are using it a lot more and trying to experiment with it a lot more.
Absolutely, and very, very interesting to have that view as well. And and again, I mean, this is all of this in the backdrop of really what this technology is all about, right? I mean, if you look at the rest of the world, and probably it's a factor of knowing a little too much about it, and that's where this whole issue of trust or the lack of trust probably is playing out in many other markets. Whereas in India, I think that we're not really seeing that. I mean, people seem to inherently trust it as a technology, and elsewhere where there's a reasonably high level of a lack of trust or distrust, whereas in India, people I think innately seem to be very trusting of new technologies, which is something that we are seeing here. And again, I don't know if that is the factor which is driving the expansion, but very clearly that's also one of the factors that emerged in this whole survey. Shaurya, what do you think about that and really how do you interpret that finding from the survey? I mean, ChatGPT was launched just a year ago and the technology has been relatively new, but Indians have been sort of using it en masse, right? I mean, that, and again, using it very productively, I would say. How do you really sort of try and make some sense out of that pattern?
So, like Jaya said, that we have been leapfrogging technologies at a very fast pace. We completely missed even the laptop age. Very few kids of my age even got to work with laptops. We just switched to smartphones. So that is one of the pivotal factors here, that we are very friendly with new technology. Secondly, I look at the use cases which are prevalent right now, mainly content creation or development work. India, interestingly, has a very huge software export business, right? We have roughly about 5 million developers in the country. And the use case which ChatGPT is solving for all of these people is increasing productivity. So that really incentivizes a user to, go ahead and chat with ChatGPT. Not just ChatGPT, a very too many, I would say, tools are now available to increase productivity. We have all seen Copilot in action. We have all seen deepfakes coming into picture. People really making art by just talking to a bot. So that increase in productivity is another huge factor here. Coming back to what you were saying about data privacy, I don't really think that we ever had a culture of protecting our online identity. So to say, if we go to WhatsApp or Instagram or Facebook, we see people just posting pictures of very young kids, etc. So that is a cultural difference, I would say, that we have here, which is in favor of the technology.
Oh, yes, sure. I mean, I see that all the while, and probably that also explains the increasing levels of fraud as well. I mean, the amount of cyber fraud that we are seeing nowadays is leapfrogging by the day, right? I mean, it's probably also explained that way as well, but I don't know whether it's
Deep fake.
yeah, which again goes back to things like deepfakes as well. But in general, the level of cyber fraud has increased tremendously. Every day, there's something in the news which says, okay, people have been cheated, and I don't know whether it is that inherent trust. I mean, the very fact that people are very trusting, right? I think that seems to be one of the things which would also cause this. But anyway, I think we'll need to see how this plays out. The technology itself has tremendous potential. I completely agree, and Indians tend to embrace anything that can help them do things quicker and faster. Jaya, any closing thoughts on this in terms of why do you think Indian consumers so quickly embracing some of these technologies?
See, I was talking about how they're using different technologies. Again, Gen AI is a very broad term. What are
Yeah.
you using Gen AI for? That is where I would kind of like dig deeper and kind of say, are we at the top of the ocean? Are we just
Mhm.
using it for, an alternative to Google search, or are we using it for something that's different? So broadly, if you say, oh, they're adopting, but adopting for what? Uh,
Yes, yes,
I think
yes.
that's the key question you'll need to explore, because when you look at commercial uses of it, and when you look at a lot more deep dive into what is it really based on, and then you will have a lot of answer. Because some of that, if it's used as a better alternative to search, then you have one opinion on it, which I think was part of the survey. But if you say what are the use cases Gen AI is being used for from a commercial perspective or from a product's perspective, then you'll have different, more fundamental, deep technology you'll need to adopt to understand that. And I think AI was always in use for a number of years now. We all kind of like built a lot of products and things around neural nets, and that was classic AI. And then you suddenly put in a conversational tool and strap it onto that, and then it's become popular. But is it popular as a search engine? Is it popular as a fundamental use case? What kind of technology underpins? Those are some of the questions I think we'll have to ask.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the whole ChatGPT thing is probably a tip of the iceberg. I mean, the number of potential opportunities where the technology can be used is huge, and I think we'll see that panning out over the next year or two, and which is where I think I want to get to next, which is really the potential of the technology in financial services, right? And again, ChatGPT probably in a very unique way appeal to the needs of people, and many of them have started to use it quite extensively. But again, if you look at the technology itself, it has quite a bit of, I'd say, there are quite a few use cases across different industries. And again, coming to the whole industry of financial services, and again, banking is very close to us as an organization. FIS does a lot with banking, and we are keeping a very close eye out on really what banks are doing about it. One question which keeps coming back internally within our own organization is: are banks ready to leverage GenAI, especially in markets like India? Are banks already doing things to move forward and leverage the technology? What are the kind of use cases they're
Yeah.
focused on within financial services? It would be very, very interesting to hear from some of you as to what really is happening out there within the banking and financial services sector. Now, when I say financial services, don't really look at it purely from a banking perspective, be it securities, be it capital markets, could be any area, right? I think I'm sure there are things happening, there are organizations responding and reacting. Prateek, given that you operate and probably not directly in the banking space and more on the brokeraging side, do you see any of this happening? Are organizations in India ready to leverage Gen AI?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think because I know a lot of people are in banking industry and I speak to them regularly. It's not surprising, but a lot of AI is being used across the board, especially for risk management. Some generative AI is being used for customer service and for operational efficiency. So when I say service, meaning people are using it for giving better generative AI for customers with their use cases, with their banking solutions, banking support majorly. And when you go to the backend side, they are using it more for operational efficiencies like KYC, automated document processing. People are using it. It is not in upfront for a customer, but if you go to organizations, they have been using it for years. When it comes to capital markets and to what we do, there's a lot of scope, and in fact there are few interesting things that we have also tried. We have also been trying to make it into a product or push it in one of our existing products. So I'll just run through a couple of good use cases which probably are interesting for the viewers. So one very interesting thing that we have tried recently is every quarter we have financial results and updates coming from all these listed companies. Okay, so and the stock markets react to those. So what we try to do is we try to put a generative AI behind it, and moment we get a result, we try to read it through the generative AI and create a short summary and trigger a research guidelines and push it to all our customers. So this is one very simple use case, but the response that we get is crazy because you don't need a person sitting behind reading through it. It is very fast. It summarizes it in a language that a customer understands, and it is able to quickly help him take a decision based on which he can trade properly. One another very interesting thing which I think is going to be the next part of our stockbroking journey, not only for us but maybe for all the stockbrokers in the country, is we are going to see a lot of data management being done via generative AI. So what I mean is a user will come to our platforms and probably just on a prompt based chart kind of a thing, it will ask, give me a chart of some 5-year data of Nifty, superimpose it on gold prices for those 5 years, and along with the RSI. So the generative AI models will in real time generate this chart and give it to the customer. Or maybe something as simple as give me a list of companies which have high RSI, So managing large amounts of fundamental data, large amounts of technical data using generative AI is something which I think is going to be the next big use case in our industry.
Thank you, Pratik. Yeah, I think those are pretty interesting. I mean, there's also an element of probably some of these things were always being done. Probably you're bringing in the element of language and the large language models in, which allow you to sort of deliver that better. I think you have a bit of that as well happening. Jaya, you wear a very global lens. I mean, you travel all over the world. You meet customers pretty much across countries. Do you have a similar experience with banks and financial services organizations? I mean, are they all really sitting up and taking notice and doing something to start to leverage the technology?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because I would segment that by the excitement by user groups. Are a lot of banks excited by it outside India? They are, but for different cases. It's more about let's wait and watch what the use cases are. If that's something fundamental to our organization, we will do it. Whereas in certain other markets, it's not just India, you would see, give me use cases that make sense because I want to use Gen AI. So that is a different pivot. Does it make sense to me? Is Gen AI the right component, etc.? Second, it went back to what you spoke about in terms of trust. There are a lot of things you cannot do outside in some markets because that's all run by data privacy protection. It is run by trust on the algorithm and what level of accuracy it produces. And it works on certain kinds of data. It does not work on certain kinds of data. And for a bank, you can't make the wrong decision if you don't have the right inputs, which is the right data. Because once you put a Gen AI use case on that set of data, which by itself is not accurate, and you're using it for a lot of unstructured information, then the accuracy is very important in certain areas, such as, let's say, credit decisioning. You can't do the credit decisioning based on imperfect data or data sets. So there is not a mad rush to say, give me what you have because it's Gen AI. If it naturally makes sense, then that is a good application to consider. Whereas in certain areas, like Pratik mentioned, customer service, customer support, giving, when you look at annual reports or stock information, that is a published data. On that data set, if you have questioning on those angles and then get the output, that is something that is a perfect data set on which you ask the questions. So there is a lot of adoption difficulties in those areas. And frankly, Harish, we were using AI for a long time in banks, and we were using it for at least 8 9 years, and we were using it in a different context. There was no massive hype around it. It was just a necessary thing to do what we would not have been able to do otherwise. As an example, one of our products, we use it for credit decisioning, where you have up to 3,000 decision points coming. Like, for example, you ask a question, do you think this corporate is diverting funds? There is no classic way of answering it by looking at like a core banking or a loan origination system. You'll have to look at unstructured data and see if the beneficiary is part of any of the blacklisted companies. Have their directors been dumping shares? Are they in the news for the wrong reasons? So you can get up to 3,000 decision points, which is very hard for a human to process. And that's when AI came in. And AI said, you know, what a human cannot process, I will process, which translates gut feeling to science. And that's where we were using it. When you use that to do large language models and context-based data and all that setting, it suddenly become cooler to call it Gen AI. But in the classic sense, in markets where they've experienced the revolution from moving from AI for a need to kind of looking at Gen AI for that particular segment, they know on what it works and what it doesn't work. And it goes back to the trust, not only in the system, but trust in the data set and the ability to make a decision of it. So those are some of the parameters, that you can't use it for a lot of cases because you don't have the large language models that can produce the most accurate and predictable outputs. And that's kind of where we need to look at it. And again, data privacy is a big restriction. We're using it non-core kind of interesting areas where it's applicable. When you look at risk and in the sustainability space, and you look at how does climate risk affect credit risk, a lot of the data that comes from that comes from Gen AI. So interesting use cases, and how do you use that to write actual, you ask for alternates in the insurance industry to kind of take climate data to look at accuracy in the accounting kind of a part for some of these areas. So we're using it for non-traditional areas, but that's when we find that the traditional data sets don't work, and therefore you need to use different algorithms.
Oh, very, very interesting. I think this is about the use cases and really where it is applicable as opposed to broad-based adoption. It's definitely, that is probably the line that most banks as well as financial service institutions will also take. I mean, eventually it is based on how applicable it is it relevant? Is it going to give me something better, something different that will drive adoption as well? And again, that makes me ask my next question really. I mean, do any of you predict any major new financial applications, even financial applications, bring up new capabilities very soon into the market? I mean, any particular use cases, any particular areas you see a very quick sort of offtake to really put out capabilities? And again, this is something I'm sure a few areas are seeing a lot of traction. So what are you really seeing in some of these areas? Where are these areas do you think the adoption of Gen AI in these particular areas is going to bring benefits? Probably Shaurya, I mean, you have a view around this?
Yeah, so I can think of two use cases right now, uh, which are already under adoption, I would say. Firstly, financial advisory.
Mhm.
It comes to really understanding a person's financials and offering them the best fundamental advice for their portfolio. Uh, Up until now, there were, while interacting with humans, there were a lot of biases with the financial advisors. Gen AI, on the other hand, is changing that. It is completely uh, focusing on what is best for the investor, right? And taking in that their portfolio and comparing it with what returns other portfolio mixes have given them. That is really interesting to me. Pratik also said that Gen AI is now crunching through all the financial reports that are available, right? So putting a layer on top of that would be very interesting.
Just quickly, I'd like to jump to just one important point before we conclude. This is about, and we've talked a bit around this, but I think we need to also try and come to a view on what can be done about it. I mean, these are the risks around the technology. What I think is being perceived as a lack of trust. It's not really a risk, but the risks really cause the lack of trust. But the risks themselves, be it biases or be it even the privacy issues that have been mentioned a few times. And what's and again, let's just do a quick round the table, get a quick round the table view on this, and probably I'll start with Pratik, and if you can quickly give us a view on what kind of risks and really how you see that these can be addressed. And I think this is about how do we really use the technology and how do we ensure that we don't go out of the way, right? So what do you think needs to be done there, Pratik?
Yeah, so very, very interesting topic. I think it's going to be a research area in itself soon. And so first and foremost, I think people have to understand how large language models and how they generative AI in general works, okay? And how why because of the underlying framework that it is built on, how easy it is to have a risk and have a security in concern. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you train the model on a wrong data, it will keep on saying the wrong stuff to people. So by polluting or by having the wrong data in place, and that is where the hackers and the other people can play around with these large language models, and it has already happened. In fact, if you read through the papers that Meta and OpenAI have released, they have said that in their initial runs, they could have, when people realized that we are running our models on these data, they created a lot of websites and fake data websites targeting and trying to pollute the buy and create a bias. So basically, there is a risk there, which probably is more for the researchers and for the people who are building these large language models more than for the customer. Now, when it comes to customer, I think one very important thing people need to understand is we are at that stage in this technology where you cannot trust this technology. So you cannot trust it blindly. What I mean by that is you can use it, but don't just take it blindly trust on it. Okay, so even when you are writing a letter or when you are writing a email using generative AI, it is better for you to read it once again, just rather than blinding. The same thing happens with coding also. So you cannot just
Okay.
trust the code that the generative AI is giving you. You have to keep evaluating or so there is a maker checker. I think there's a maker checker in place here, and if people don't use that, it is going to create a lot of problems. Ethically also, I think, like there one mentions about deepfakes and invading privacy. I think that is something that the platforms that are giving, for example, OpenAI or the other platforms which are sharing this, it's a concern for them, that whether they are ethically the right company to give those products, or they have the policies in place to make sure that ethically there is no problem. Also, one very interesting thing in perspective of India, I would want to add, is regulators. So we are a heavily regulated industry. broking, even banks for that matter. If regulators don't see AI adopting to the compliance, I don't think the regulators are going to be in favor of these products. So regulatory compliance is, I think, also going to be a very interesting field in itself. I think we are going to see a lot of products or a lot of companies trying to fill that gap, trying to make sure that your AI products are regulatory approved. I think that is also going to play a very interesting role.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
these are some of the points that I have on the risks.
Absolutely. I mean, the regulatory piece was an interesting one. I had not thought about it, but yes, I think at some point the regulators will need to get in and start to evaluate the implications as well as the risks. Shauram, anything else you'd like to add to some of these areas? Anything else you think should be also thought about?
I mean, one of the key points was regulatory changes only.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of institutions are sitting on the fringe just because of that, just because they don't know how the
Okay.
regulator is going to respond
React. Yeah.
to generative AI. Secondly, I think the one of the lesser talk terms is the climate impact generative AI will have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It does use up a lot of energy, a lot of infrastructure needs to be built for it to perform well. Those two things are, I think, are something to be thought about.
Thanks, Sharon. Jaya, anything else you think is relevant here in this context?
I do have a lot of points, but I'll probably pick the top three in my list.
Yeah.
One, it would also serve as a summary. Don't use Gen AI just because it's a cool thing to use. The business must drive the use of technology, and technology still is an enabler to a business use case. That is something that people need to remember. And in the context of what Shauryam says, absolutely, we have to be mindful of climate. Sustainability is key. And therefore, just don't use Gen AI because it's a cool thing to do, but look at the business case, compelling business case to do it. Second is more garbage in, garbage out. There's a lot of garbage out there. So that is going to produce a garbage out kind of a situation. So be super mindful of what is that you're using, what data sets are you training them on, and what is the output and what's the relevance of it. Retail application is one, customer service is a different context. But when you're using it in the context of what you spoke about, banking and capital markets, accuracy is key. And therefore, you'll need to be really mindful of that. And last things, the ethics around the use of GenAI, whether it's data privacy or regulatory, all of that is a key component of that. And I would do case in point in terms of like the crypto. We went in from an India perspective, we were a little late in the game when a lot of the other markets had suffered a lot. And they had come up with regulations as a consequence of it. And then we went in and we said, you know what, let's kind of like either block it completely or kind of look at regulations and the purpose of it. I think we should not miss the bus on GenAI because, as you rightly pointed out, Harish, we seem to be the ones most curious about this particular technology. Our Indians seem to have taken it like fish to water, and therefore we need to be the first to also look at it from a regulatory lens. And that's where I would summarize.
Thank you, Jaya. I think you hit the
Sorry, I just
summit.
wanted to add one more short thing.
Please,
I think this will apply to all of us and also to some of the other viewers. Is I think there is a lot of influencer based AI in play right now. I mean, people are talking about it without knowing about it, and I think it can be a very, very bad thing for a lot of people. So I hope that all of us, plus all the influencers out there, are speaking about it correctly rather than just speaking for the heck of it.
Oh yeah, I mean there are vested interests for sure. I mean there are organizations which will benefit from broader adoption, but again that should not just be the basis for just pushing people to adopt. Yeah, absolutely, yeah, it should be done the right way. So I think it's been a great discussion. I mean, a lot of interesting thoughts, a lot of interesting information. We know how consumers have been thinking. We also need to now see as the whole question of trust start getting more thought, what will really start to happen. I think that's something that we'll need to keep an eye out. The AI landscape globally as well as in India will evolve. And again, I hope it's not just a blip on the hype cycle. And I truly believe we are at the cusp of something really transformational. The potential seems to be phenomenal, and I think we'll see some interesting things for sure. But let's see. I think I'd right now keep my fingers crossed. While there's a lot of potential, adoption, rollouts, acceptance, all of that will start to play out over the next couple of years. So thank you all. It's been a great discussion, and thank you for all your insights. We hope to do more of this with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harish.
Thank you.
Thank you.